Fallout wants you to laugh at Thaddeus. That's not an accident. It's a trap. He's introduced as weak, awkward, disposable, the kind of brotherhood squire the story seems designed to chew up and spit out for tone and irony. And most viewers take the bait. They assume he exists to be humiliated, to die ignobly, or to serve as a running joke about how cruel the wasteland is to people without power. But Fallout has never wasted screen time like that. When the show repeatedly lets a character survive things that should kill him, and then lingers on those moments, it's not comedy. It's calibration. Thaddeus is not a punchline. He's a stress test. And by the end of Season 1, it becomes clear that he exists to quietly change how mutation works in the television canon of Fallout, whether the audience is ready for that or not.
I think you might be a ghoul. Oh no.
Before we get into the heavy analysis, here's a quick recap of what this video is actually about. Thaddeus takes a mysterious serum sold by a wasteland drifter. The serum heals a crippling injury almost instantly. Later, Thaddeus survives a crossbow bolt through the neck with barely any lasting damage. Across these moments, his body begins behaving differently from everyone else's in the show. His recovery is fast, clean, and strangely efficient. At the same time, his psychological states subtly shifts. Online theories exploded in every direction imaginable. Vault-Tec cures, immortality chems, throwaway comedy logic. But when you strip all of that away and focus only on what the show actually presents on screen, only two explanations matter. One explains what Thaddeus is becoming. The other explains what Fallout is preparing us for. Everything else is noise. The real pivot point in Thaddeus' arc isn't the crossbow bolt. It's the serum. Fallout has always used chems, radiation, and experimental substances as narrative accelerants. But the way this moment is staged is doing far more work than it seems. There's no dramatic build-up, no ominous music, no explicit warning. It's a casual exchange framed like a grim joke. A desperate man buying hope from a stranger who doesn't care if he lives or dies. That mundanity is the horror. Fallout's most dangerous ideas are never introduced with spectacle. They're introduced the same way civilization ended in this universe. Quietly, cheaply, and without oversight. The initial healing alone doesn't prove much. Fallout characters survive incredible injuries all the time. But the show doesn't celebrate the miracle, it studies the aftermath. When Thaddeus later survives a bolt through the neck, the framing changes completely. This isn't shot like slapstick or shock value. The camera lingers. Other characters react with confusion and unease. Most importantly, the injury doesn't stick. There's no prolonged pain, no visible degradation, no lingering instability. In Fallout, mutation almost always leaves scars. Radiation rots you. Survival costs you something. Thaddeus, recovery doesn't follow that rule, and that's the red flag. This is where most fan theories immediately collapse. Radiation exposure doesn't behave this way. Luck doesn't behave this way. Narrative convenience definitely doesn't behave this way. Thaddeus, healing looks optimized, almost procedural, like a system executing a function rather than a body fighting to stay alive. And that distinction narrows the field dramatically, leaving us with the first and most grounded explanation: accelerated, artificial ghoulification. This theory works not because it's flashy, but because the show itself points us there. Maximus explicitly tells Thaddeus that he's becoming a ghoul, but within Fallout lore, ghoulification has never been a single, uniform process. It's always existed on a spectrum. Some ghouls decay rapidly. Others maintain structural integrity for decades. Some retain near-normal cognition far longer than expected. What makes Thaddeus unusual isn't the destination. It's the velocity. Traditional ghoulification is slow, driven by prolonged radiation exposure. Thaddeus. Transformation behaves like a switch being flipped. That difference matters because it implies intent. The serum doesn't just heal, it bypasses the natural timeline of mutation. It forces a shortcut. In doing so, the show quietly introduces the idea of an engineered ghoul subtype, one designed for immediate utility, faster regeneration, greater physical resilience, delayed degradation. Fallout has always explored humanity's obsession with improving survival through shortcuts, and it has never allowed that obsession to end cleanly. This explanation also works narratively because it's accessible. Casual viewers already understand what ghouls are. No deep lore dump required. The horror comes from refinement, not novelty. But this theory becomes far more unsettling when you consider where the serum came from. Not a legendary pre-war lab. Not a Vault-Tec facility. Not even a Brotherhood stockpile. It came from a drifter. A nobody, a black market transaction on the side of the road. That single detail quietly detonates the Brotherhood of Steel's entire worldview. Their ideology depends on the belief that hoarding technology protects humanity from itself. Thaddeus proves that belief is already obsolete. The most dangerous advancements aren't locked away anymore. They're loose, portable, profitable. This brings us to the second theory, the one that carries higher narrative risk but much greater long-term payoff. Thaddeus as an FEV-adjacent mutation, not a full supermutant. Not yet. Something earlier, something unstable, a proto-state that carries the virus, core traits, without its iconic physical outcome. This interpretation relies less on dialogue and more on pattern recognition, because Thaddeus' biology doesn't behave like a ghoul's in several key ways. His regeneration lacks the necrotic tissue damage typical of ghoulification. His tolerance to trauma escalates rapidly rather than stabilizing. And most importantly, his psychological shift appears before any dramatic physical transformation. In Fallout lore, that sequencing matters. Forced evolutionary virus experiments often alter cognition before restructuring the body. The show's refusal to name FEV outright feels deliberate. Dropping that term too early would drag the series into dense lore territory before the broader audience is ready. Instead, the writers are doing what Fallout has always done best, letting effects precede explanations. Mutation without labels, consequences before context. If supermutants are coming in future seasons, and narratively, escalation demands they eventually are, Thaddeus functions perfectly as a bridge character. It's important to be precise here. Based on current on-screen evidence, Thaddeus is not a super mutant. He shows no skeletal deformation, no massive strength increase, no extreme physical restructuring. That's why engineered ghoulification remains the primary explanation for what he is. But the FEV-adjacent reading explains what the show is preparing us for. One is present tense. The other is foreshadowing. And Fallout has always escalated its biological horror in stages. Thematically, this distinction is critical. Ghouls represent survival through decay, endurance at the cost of humanity. Supermutants represent survival through force, evolution imposed rather than endured. Introducing that escalation gradually through Thaddeus allows the show to raise stakes without tonal whiplash. It also reframes the Brotherhood of Steel in a devastating way. If mutation can now be engineered, distributed, and sold outside institutional control, then the Brotherhood isn't protecting humanity. They're clinging to a fantasy of control that no longer exists. This is why every other theory about Thaddeus fails under scrutiny. Vault-Tec miracle cures lack textual evidence and contradict the show's deliberate avoidance of overt corporate fingerprints at this stage. Immortality serums lifted from game lore don't align with Thaddeus' lack of consent, understanding, or control. And the idea that he exists purely for comic relief ignores how carefully the show frames his survival moments. His body is treated as an anomaly, not a punchline. Fallout knows the difference between slapstick and setup, and Thaddeus is unmistakably the latter. In the end, Thaddeus serves a very specific narrative purpose. He exists to redefine mutation for the television canon. He shifts it from something accidental and environmental into something intentional, optimized, and distributable. Whether the show ultimately confirms him as an engineered ghoul or reveals him as an early symptom of something far worse, the direction is clear. Fallout's biological horror is evolving. Thaddeus is not the monster waiting at the end of the road. He's the warning sign telling us the road itself has changed. And the most unsettling part is that just like the characters around him, most viewers are still laughing instead of paying attention.